Hello friends, welcome to the Angular Signal video session. In this video session we are going to discuss about all the concept related to Angular Signal. So let's get started without further delay. So let's see why this new way of reactivity introduced by the Angular in Angular 16. Angular have Rxjs support that provide everything to achieve reactivity. All over the world there are many projects are running in Angular. It means we have everything today to achieve reactivity in Angular. But why Angular introduced the signal after 7 years from the first release in May 2016? Major problem with Angular is performance for the large application due to the change detection mechanism. So Signal solves this problem just to apply the synchronous reactivity to the particular variable when it changes, rather than triggering the change detection mechanism. So let's see how the current change detection mechanism works in Angular and the problem with this mechanism. So the Zone.js file is taking care of this mechanism, and whenever any value got assigned first time or changes, that time that component will inform to this Zone.js, and this started checking from root component, and it will check in all the component even though there is no change. Then also it will check. Let's say you click in somewhere in your UI, this jet component assigned one value to one variable, or it changes the variable value. So that time it will inform to Zone.js. It will start it checking again in the UI, and it will check in all the component without worrying about whether there is, and it will start it checking in all over the component even though there is no change. And sometime in UI we are having function in our template or in our HTML, and when this function will get called, it will update variable in the component, and it will trigger the change detection mechanism, and again it will load this component function, and it will again change the value. And sometime for some second it create the circular dependency in UI. You may have observed the issue, sometime our UI is blinking. So let's see how the Angular Signal is solving this problem. And we can also say Angular Signal is making Zoneless Angular because it is not using the Zone.js library. So whenever, let's say, we define one variable in our jet component, it is a signal variable, let's say, and whenever that signal variable get changed, so change detection mechanism apply the changes to that particular variable, right? And once that value updated, it will render the HTML. So it means chain detection mechanism is reside until this component. It means Angular is not triggering the Zone.js to check the chain detection mechanism. And if we are having signal variable in service, automatically it will notify the consumer of this signal. So let's say that signal variable used by the jet component or n component. So whenever this signal variable is updated, it will notify to jet component there is new change, please reload the component. So this way it will not trigger the Zone.js. Angular Signal is a wrapper around a value that can notify interested consumer when the value changes. So whenever the value changes, it will notify the interested consumer. We already saw here, it notify the end component and jet component whenever we updated service based signal. So signal can contain any value from the simple primitive to complex data structure. So we can have signal with string, number and boolean, and we can also have complex data structure like array and object. Angular 16 introduces reactivity through signal. So we already knows that Angular 16 introduces reactivity through signal, but it is a synchronous reactivity rather than asynchronous reactivity. So a signal is a value that tell Angular when it changes. So we already saw here, whenever this value changes, it will update this component. Please note, please re-render your component, there is a new change kind of. Signal is a synchronous unlike Rxjs. So we know Rxjs reactive extension to JavaScript is a asynchronous, and this signal is just synchronous. Signal is not going to replace Rxjs, but some operator we will stop using, like subject and behavior subject. Subject are type of observable in Angular that allow you to send and receive value between components. Now this can be achieved by signal. So let's say we defined one variable here and we updated that variable in this component, so automatically it will notify to n number of consumer, right? So same we can achieve through the signal. So why we will go for the subject and behavior subject? They will trigger the chain detection mechanism. So our goal will be using the signal so that we can make our Angular fast with Zoneless Angular. Signal API and types from the Angular core. So there is signal API from Angular core, and there are types from Angular core signal, and this is the generic type, and writable signal. By default, signal is a writable, can be set, updated and muted using signal API. So whenever we define a signal with any type, by default it's writable. It means we can apply operation like set, update and mutate. Signal can be defined as read only if we specify the type signal. So let's say you created the signal with any type, here is a boolean type, and you specify the type signal boolean. It means now we cannot modify this variable, it can be used as a read only. Now let's discuss about writable signal functions like set, update and mutate. So how to use set function? Set function is available with writable signal to assign a new value to signal, and here you can see the boolean signal. By default it is writable signal, but if you want to specify the type manually, that is also fine. If you will not specify this also, then also it is writable signal. So we know boolean is a primitive data type, and these are immutable data type. So let's say if we want to update the value, so we can use the set function because we are going to replace the previous value, right? So we can use the set function to assign a new value. But if it is an object or array type, then we need to decide whether we want to replace the complete object or just we need to update the few part of the object. So we have to, for that we have update or mutate function, we will discuss in next slide. Set function can be used with all types of data type, means we can use with all types, primitive and reference data types. Set can be used to modify the primitive value. So since this is the primitive data type, so we can modify using set function, right? Because we already discussed these are immutable data types. And set can be used to modify the reference type also if we want to replace the previous object. So if you will see this example, here we are getting the list of products from the API, and we are first time we are assigning because there were nothing previously, it was the empty object. So for the assignation we use the set, and if we want to replace the complete object, then also we can use the set function. So how to use update function? Update function is available with writable signal to modify the signal. Update function can be used on any types if the new value depending on the previous value. Update function return type should match with the previous object type. So let's take this example. We have here number signal, and add one function and minus one function. We are taking the previous value. This is the previous value, and we are adding in the plus one in the previous value. For the minus one, minusing one from the previous value. Similarly, we can also use update with the reference type. Only the thing is we need to return the same type after updating it. So if you will see here, we are updating email for this user signal, and then we are returning it. But for this kind of scenario we should use mutate, where we need not to return user. So how to use mutate function? Mutate function is available with writable signal to modify the signal. Mutate function mostly used with array and object type. Mutate is used to modify the part of array and object. Mutate function by default return the mutated object, so we need not to return. So if you will see in the previous example, during update function discuss, we saw this signal, user signal, whenever we were modifying the email, that time we had to return the user object. Here we need not to return anything. By default it will mutate and return update the object. So update we should use if your new value is depending on the previous value, and if you want to just modify the object and it is not depending on the previous, then we can go for the mutate. So how to use computed API from signal? Computed API from signal is depending on signal variable. If signal variable change, then this computed function trigger automatically and create a new signal with new computed value from the signal. So let's take one example. On change cart item, signal automatically executed computed function and calculate the total cart price. So let's take this example. Here we have a cart item. Initially this signal is having no cart item, but when you will push cart item, so this computed, if you will see in this computed, we are computing the cart item, means we are using the cart item signal. So whenever you will push or add the item to your cart, automatically this computed will execute and construct the total cart price. It will provide us the total cart price automatically, means we need not to manually call this function. Just we have to push the item to our cart items. So reading signal in onPush component. When an onPush component uses a signal's value in its template, Angular will track the signal as a dependency of that component. When that signal is updated, automatically Angular automatically mark the component to ensure it's get updated the next time chain reduction runs. So whenever you are using onPush strategy, and if your signal variable is updated in the parent component, so automatically your child component will get refreshed with the updated value, or we can say signal will trigger the chain reduction for your onPush component. Effect signal are useful because they can notify interested consumer when they change. An effect is an operation that runs whenever one or more signal value change. Effect always run at least once. Effect always execute asynchronously during the chain reduction process. So effects are rarely needed in most of the application code, but may be useful in some specific circumstances. So let's say if you want to put log and you want to see the value, then we can use the effect keeping data in sync with window.local storage. So let's say if you want to you are managing the state of one variable, and whenever you will refresh your application, so we can pick that value from the local storage. And adding custom DOM behavior that can't be expressed with template syntax. Perform custom rendering to a canvas, charting library, or other third-party library like AgGrid. Avoid using effect for the propagation of state change. This can result in expression change after it has checked error, infinite circular update, or unnecessarily chain reduction cycle. Because of this risk, setting signal is disallowed by default in effect, but can be enabled if absolutely necessary. So we should not update our signal in effect. So basically we already saw the example here. These are the mainly used use cases for the effect. So when you create an effect, it is automatically destroyed when it is enclosing context is destroyed. This means that effect created within a component are destroyed when the component is destroyed. So the same goes for effect within directive service. So it is automatically destroyed whenever the enclosing context is destroyed, right? So effect return an effect reference that can be used to destroy them manually via destroy operation. Be careful to actually clean up such effect when they are no longer required. Advanced topic. So signal equality function, reading without tracking dependency, effect cleanup function. So these are actually advanced topic you can read from Angular IO. We are not covering now because Angular signal is not that stable, and we will see in detail in further video. Angular depth tool not able to display the signal value. It may be fixed in Angular 17. So we can see here currently this user is displaying like bound signal, but we cannot see the value. That's all friends. So we'll meet you in the next video. Please like and subscribe.